Are regrets always regrettable in a career?
Not only did you not live the life you were supposed to live, you were afraid to even step up to the plate and take a swing. The first thing you do is give the outcome a permission to fail. The actual video that you do doesn't have to turn out great. It can be horrible, but you've learned, and now your product level goes up.
Well, today we have Tim Packer. You're going to love this story. He is an artist who makes a great living, and he didn't used to. In fact, he didn't even used to be an artist. Can't wait to hear your story, Tim. How are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited about this conversation.
Yeah, I am too. I've been looking forward to it. I am drawn to people who do something that seems crazy and pull it off, and then hear their step-by-steps. And you're like the epitome of that. You've got 100,000 followers across all the platforms in the world. That's amazing. And it's not just because they saw your picture on some search. You've worked at it, right?
Yeah, it's been, I think I started social media back in 2015. And then learned very early on too the whole kind of the golden rule of social media, which is give value first before you ask. And so it's been a lot of trying to share everything I've learned with other artists who kind of share that same dream. And if you give people a lot of value, then they'll follow you because they want more.
It's strange how if you give people a lot of value, you become valuable.
Yep.
Who would have thought? That's why that is first. Right?
I always tell people to give more than what you're asking for, because be selfish, not because you will get more out of life if you always give for more than what you ask for. At the end of the day, you will end up with a lot more. So don't do it because you're being altruistic, although that's true, but do it because you will experience more success. You just will.
Yeah, it's true. I believe in the altruism side, but go read Adam Grant's book, audience, and you'll get a whole book of evidence that it's the way to go. Hey, I want you to give us your biggest learning, big question, biggest learning of your entire life as far as getting a work life and a career put together. What's your advice?
My advice is, again, for people who are looking to make that move, and that was me. I was a police officer who realized that, I'm an artist, but I'm not painting, but that's who I am, and that's what I'd trained for. And now what am I going to do about it? And there's a huge amount of fear that comes along with that about making that kind of a switch. And there was a situation, I was in a mastermind for course creators a few years ago, and there was a young girl there that she was an engineer. She worked, I think it was for Amazon or Apple, but was like, and she came from a family where you're going to be doctor, lawyer, CEO. Those are kind of like the options. And she was on that path in the big corporate world. But what she really wanted to do, and what she was on this course for, was to promote her personal brand. And she wanted to be an influencer on Instagram and Facebook in terms of fashion and lifestyle. And so she asked me, because I was one of the older guys there and I'd had this kind of varied career where I'd made these kind of decisions. She asked me, like, what can you tell me to get over that fear of being judged and that fear of taking that chance? And so then I kind of recounted it back to in 2019. There was twice when I came very close to death. I was lying on the gurney in the hospital, and my wife and I weren't sure if I was going to be there kind of 10 minutes from now. And the thing that was great about that, as strange as this sounds, is while I was lying there, it's like, okay, yes, I knew this was going to be hard on my wife and my boys if this was it for me. But the overwhelming feeling that I had was just gratitude. I just thought, like, if this is it, wow, I got more kicks at the happiness can than most people I know. And it was just this overwhelming feeling of gratitude. And I'd done all the stuff that I'd wanted to do, and I'd tried all of the things that I'd wanted to try. And so I just looked at her and I said to her, like, you're going to face that moment at some point in your life. We all are, where it's over. And what you don't want is to approach, I said, what you should really be afraid of is not other people's judgment, not failure at something you try. You should be afraid of approaching that moment and realize that not only did you not live the life you were supposed to live, you were afraid to even step up to the plate and take a swing. And that's what we should be terrified of. And it's like, you know what? Even with Babe Ruth, you know, when he was setting the records, he was still striking out 2 out of 3 times, right? If you're hitting 300 in baseball, wow, you're killing it. So like, yeah, we are going to have failures. We're going to have things that don't work. But that feeling, I just really, I wish everybody, when they're approaching their last days, had that feeling that I had, with this feeling of peace. And it's like, okay, I'm not ready to go yet, but if it's time, okay, this was a hell of a life. And so that's kind of the biggest advice I'd give people out there, is just really think about what fears you're letting dictate your choices.
So you don't want anyone to have regret for swinging for singles and then also swinging for home runs at the same time, because you live once.
I would say, though, that there's smart risk and not smart risk. So it's like when I left the police force to pursue art as a full-time career, I didn't just do that after a weekend workshop or binge watching Bob Ross and going, this is what I'm going to do, right? So I had really decided early on. Actually, that whole thing that I'm talking, there's a thing called mortality motivation. And we talked a bit, but when you are really, whether it's you're kind of faced with your own mortality or someone near you, it really makes you look at your life and see what you want. What are you doing, right? And what am I going to do with my life? And I had one of those moments in my 30s where I decided I wanted to get back to painting seriously. I had no thoughts of leaving the police force. But I got serious about painting, and I thought, okay, well, I need to start scheduling my painting time first and really start focusing on what are the things I need to improve to get better. And I thought that at some point, well, when I retire, this could be a nice side hustle. But I really threw myself in, and within 3 years, actually, I'd been elected to a couple national arts organizations. I'd had work exhibited in international jury shows. I was starting to get a lot of commission work and selling work. And so then my wife said to me, like, okay, I think we should talk about not if you leave the police force, but when. And so that was a kind of a scary thing, walking away from a job, walking away from a pension. But we didn't just do it in a vacuum. I'd already proved that that I was dedicated to this, that I was doing the work, that there was people that wanted it. But we also wanted to make sure, okay, we don't want to do this if this means we lose our house or whatever, right? If things don't work out. So, I mean, we actually crunched the numbers, and my wife had a very good job. And we thought, even if this kind of doesn't go, like, we're not going to lose our house. We're not going to go on vacation anywhere, but we're still going to be okay. And then also I had been a detective in the commercial crime unit, in the fraud squad of the Toronto Police Headquarters. So I was investigating frauds over $2 million. And I knew that if this didn't work out, I could put on a suit and get a job. And my wife and I actually had an agreement that, she said that she thought this would be in our best long-term economic interest for me to actually pursue art because of what I'd already shown. But we had the agreement that if it ever becomes clear that's not going to happen, then I would put on a suit and get a job. So I'm not recommending anybody just decide, wow, I'd like to be an artist, and quit their job and then go see, right? I'm a big believer in taking small steps and proving the concept until when you make that leap, if you're making a big transition, you've already done a lot of the research and you've proven to yourself that, first of all, you have the passion to do it. Because there's one thing about loving to paint on the weekends. Are you willing and able to do it 6 days a week for 4 or 5 hours a day?
Yeah, and also sitting in a studio painting is not how you sell art, right? So There's new tasks that will appear. Let me just ask you this. You've mentioned some very interesting things to me, some of the things that drew me to have you on the show. You talked about the police force. You talked about the business side of art, which we're going to spend most of our time on, and talking about the how-tos of that for anyone who's wanting to do anything like this. And then we're going to have a debate about that a little bit, about, with the secret folks, like you just manifest it, like you're talking about a bit. or do you have to actually work at it?
Yeah,
and your crystal
you won't
ball
find
that you
any
call a spreadsheet.
woo-woo in me.
No, that's what the artist with no woo-woo. I'm dying to hear that. The other thing besides the police in that business side of art and how serious you were and the steps and things is you mentioned your near-death experiences. So we're going to talk about each of those, but I want to go back and instead of just fly past them, I want you to share just a couple of minutes, if you would, about your experience almost leaving this planet, and tell us a little bit what that looked like.
Okay, so I had Graves' disease, which attacks your thyroid, and so what happens is your thyroid's supposed to be the size of 2 thumbs. Mine grew to the size of 2 fists, so I looked like an NFL lineman. My neck was just huge. And so the first time that I went into what's called a thyroid storm, which is where your thyroid just keeps pumping out more and more of the thyroxine, which pushes your metabolism faster and faster and faster. And then your heart rate just keeps climbing. And if they can't stop it, then your heart will just go until it's done. And then then they can't even bring you back because it's like a marathon runner's legs after a marathon. It's just the muscles just poof. So I was in one of those, and they couldn't get my heart to slow down. And then they're out, you can hear them. This is in the emergency, and they're calling for the cardiologist, but they're calling like every 30 seconds, like, get him down here now, because they'd given me the medication that was supposed to slow it down. But it didn't. Now, eventually the cardiologist, but at that moment, like, you can tell by people's behavior, like, everybody here is very concerned. My wife's looking at me and it's like, I love you too. That one wasn't that dramatic, right? Although that was dramatic enough.
Pretty dramatic, yeah.
But the second one, so what happened is,
as you listen, I just want to let you know that there's more we're trying to help you with. Valuable benefits we've invested in for members of our Bold Encounters Club. We've also created a way for you to just see if these advantages help you. Go to boldencounters.tv and join, and you'll get a free month's access to experience premium guidance, tools, and the care that we've invested in this work. At boldencounters.tv, you can also give club access to someone else you think may want more meaning or need more money in their life's work. Stay with us today, and at the end, you'll hear all about these great benefits.
because my thyroid grew so big, it grew 50 additional arteries and veins.
Oh my word.
Then were all throughout here. And then my surgeon, and they were trying to kind of get it smaller using drugs. They said, we can't do radiation because it's so big that the radiation would kill you. But it just kept growing. They couldn't get it to stop growing. So finally my surgeon said, we have to go in now. They'd just done a CAT scan, and they could see that a couple of the veins and arteries were about to join into my aorta. And so he said, if that happens, now it's open heart surgery. We got to crack you open. So we need to get this out before that happens. And my surgeon, it was kind of funny. I mean, people I'm an ex-copper, so you have the choice of laughing or crying at a lot of stuff, and we always choose to laugh. But my surgeon said to me, he said, like, I love to cut. Like, that's what I do. That's what put my kids through university. That's what put a pool in our backyard. He said, I don't want to do this surgery. He said, but we have to do this surgery. But he said, it's very risky, and you need to get your together and kind of just deal with everything you need to deal with before we do that. So then, anyways, we came in, we had the surgery. It took my thyroid out. It's normally about a 20-minute surgery. I was in there for about 6 hours. And then they were moving me, so my wife was waiting for 7 hours for me to come back up to the hospital room. And so as they're wheeling me down the aisle, now luckily my surgeon had stayed. He was not going to be there, but there was an emergency case came in that he stayed for. And then when he came out, he saw that they were taking me finally out of the recovery room back up to the hospital room. So he thought, well, I'll tag along and just talk to him, see how he's doing. So as they wheel me into the room, my wife's kind of out in the hallway, and the doctor says to her, just wait till we get him into the bed and then you can come in. So they wheel me over and they go to move me from the surgical bed to the hospital bed. and I can just feel something go pop in my
Oh.
neck.
Oh.
And then all of a sudden, this huge pressure, and I'm like, I can't breathe. And the nurse is there, and she's like, he's got to bleed, doctor, because what had happened is one of the clamps off one of the arteries in my neck that they'd cut, it came open, and now the pressure was shutting off my airway.
Oh, my word.
And so luckily my surgeon was there. But what happened, as my wife's walking over towards the bed, this happens. He rips off they didn't have stitches, they just had surgical tape. But he rips off the surgical tape to expose the incision that's about this big. He takes a pair of scissors that was beside the bed. He sticks it in between the stuff and then pushes and so blood just goes fountaining as my wife is walking across to the bed. All of a sudden she sees this, and again, yeah, like very, very scary. And if my surgeon hadn't have been there, that would have been it. I don't think there's any way the nurse would have done this, would have had the, but anyways, he ends up saying to me afterwards, while this is going on, he's like, I got you. You're going to be okay. He said, you got lots of blood. He said, we're just going to have to do this every 5 minutes with the blood, because there was no surgical rooms available, because I was the last one to come out of surgery and they were just cleaning them. So basically for 20 minutes, we're lying there, and every few minutes he's pushing on my neck, levering the scissors so that we can relieve the pressure. And then we went down for surgery. It was funny when we were in the elevator. So it's just he and I and the nurse in the elevator going down to surgery. And he looks at me and he says, I told you I didn't want to do this surgery.
Oh, I'm so glad you're vertical. That does not sound like that was the typical outcome of such a scenario. And yet there he was, ready to solve it. Unbelievable. Now, I got to ask you this follow-up. I didn't have anything bloody, but I did have 4 doctors walk into the ER room where I was incoherent with pain in my back and tell my 15-year-old son and my wife that this was it. And and yet here I am. You know, I had a spine infection that went septic, and we waited a little long because I just thought it was a backache, and it was a problem. Anyway, most people, by far the vast majority in my case, don't make it, and yet you and I are. The reason I bring my autobiography up is because I think I had already decided to go out onto my own, doing some of the same things that I do. So there was some expertise and ability and some knowledge behind, coaching CEOs and such. And yet you transitioned dramatically. But in that moment, and I'd already decided to do it, but I was still employed. This spine infection took care of that.
Yeah.
But there's often a very interesting intersection between something like that and obviously your other parts of life, but also your work life. Was there an interesting intersection that was profound in that scenario with your work life?
Yeah, at that time, I was making all of my money just painting. So selling my paintings and selling prints of my work. That's how I made all my money. And I also, I'd been doing social media, I'd been doing YouTube for a number of years, just as a passion project on my own to give back. I'm a huge believer in karma, so it's kind of like I've experienced all this success. I really feel, and I also feel I have some knowledge about what it takes to become successful in art, and especially at some things that are contrary to the common wisdom, which I see artists following, which is why they're starving. And I just felt I had this real obligation, responsibility to share everything that I'd learned to get to where I was living the life of my dreams as an artist, because I wasn't the most talented kid in any class I ever took. There was always people better than me. And so when I said I didn't have any regrets at that time, I actually didn't. But over the course of that year, because it took about a year until it was clear I was going to be fine, there was one regret that did sort of percolate to the surface. And that was the fact that I was playing it safe in terms of trying to share what I'd learned to help change people's lives for the better. I was just doing it small. And I had on my own decided that somehow I was being noble by just, you can find YouTube videos where I say, I'm going to make my money off my rich clients that buy my art, but you'll never get me charging for my teaching because I'm going to give that away. And then a few people, luckily, it's why it's also nice to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. A few people said to me, you're being selfish. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, well, you have decided somehow that there's something noble about you not charging for your teaching. But that's, if you really believe that you can impact people's life in a very positive way and at scale, don't you think if you were to, rather than doing it just part-time as a passion project and getting whatever, if you were to go all in on this, you're going to be able to change and impact so many more people's lives. But to do that, you're going to need to charge for it, obviously, because that's going to take away from income you're making as an artist. And while I was kind of in that recovery period, I really decided, I thought, if I get healthy, because I thought that's a huge thing. I'm going to pivot now from just painting and making money. Now I've got to build an online teaching platform and try and figure out a way to make a living doing that. I need to be healthy, right? And it's going to be a multi-year thing. So, but I did decide during that time, if I get healthy, that's what I'm going to do. And then we did. In 2020, we formed My Online Art Academy, and it's been incredibly successful. We just passed $600,000 in course sales in the last 5 years. And then I just come out with my book. And I'm finally now getting back to painting too, but it was about a 3 or 4 year period where 80% of my focus was on creating and developing and marketing the Online Art Academy. And that wasn't a financial decision. I knew it's like, I could have just been cranking out more paintings and making lots of money. I've never made as much money in a single year as I did the last year before I decided I'm going to start a YouTube channel and start helping other artists, because all of a sudden I wasn't focusing all of my money on, or all of my time on creating the art. But the thing is, I can tell you, I have already changed a number of people's lives who are now off and living careers, actually some of them even more successful than me, and that's much more fulfilling to me now than kind of selling another painting or 10 paintings or 100 paintings.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. I have a similar and analogous thing in parallel where I can really help about 6 clients at a time, and I usually have 4 or 5, sometimes 6. 6 gets tough because you can't do enough research, you can't do enough thinking about each one, you can't spend the time, and so you really, really, really get results for 6 people. However, it's hard. You go home and you look at this show, for instance, and all of a sudden you have 2,000 people you could help, and obviously in a different way. But to help 100,000 people like you do is quite big compared to just selling as many pieces of art as you can. Yeah. But it's an engine that you can't quit painting, right? You can't quit selling your own art, or the other falls apart. Is
well,
that
I
true?
did for a few years, actually. And so, yeah.
Yeah, tell me about that.
It was full time. It's like, I thought.
Oh, it's extraordinary how much time. Yeah.
And we thought, I thought I'm going to create the courses, all the stuff that I believe in. I'm going to create a kind of lesson plan and all that, and then we're going to put it up there. And it's like, okay, well, and actually the very first year we did good. We did, I think in the first 6 months, we did like 70,000 in sales of courses. And it's like, well, this is good. But then what we realized, okay, that's all the people who already know who you are, who would want to buy a course, have bought a course. So say 100,000 followers, whatever, right? Now how are you going to reach the 6 billion other people out there that might want your course? And then we realized, oh my God, this is a marketing thing. Now we need to learn all about marketing, and then we need to learn about Facebook ads, and we need to learn about hooks and kind of all of this kind of stuff, right? And so then that was a whole other learning experience. And we feel really right now, my son and I were saying that, we've spent the last 5 years trying to figure out the way that we can kind of have like consistent systems in place that continually kind of promote the Art Academy and promote the courses, as well as me creating new content for the courses, creating content for social media, and me getting in the studio and painting, and also writing a book. And we're finally at the stage now where we can actually focus on all of these systems at the same time. But what it's taken over the last 5 years is to have intense effort on kind of one of them for a couple of years to figure it out. And then that was initially just creating the online Art Academy. And then it's like, oh, now we got to learn marketing, right? And
it's like, let me see if I've got this right, because it's how I'm experiencing. I did experience it. I'm getting kind of on the other side a little bit, but not all the way. It's like you go to work in a job and you're getting called because you're a cop in a car for all these different cases that kind of transpire pretty quickly. And that happens in a workplace too. You have a major project that they're relying on you for, but it has a million different little pieces and you can kind of just shepherd all of them at once. But when you take something on like you did, like a big channel, and doing it right, and teaching the things and putting it together and codifying at a commercial grade all of your ideas, it's like you have 5 tigers that you're trying to tame and get the tail in your hands of, and it's not the same at all, and you can't like pay attention to them all. You've got to like do one at a time and not die still.
And still figure out a way to pay the bills and keep the lights on.
Yeah. Let me brag for you for just a little bit. So when I watched your show, I saw something invisible just because of my kind of entry into this space a couple years ago. The studio that you film in, it looks like a studio.
Yep.
And yet I look at your face, and your face has the right lighting on it. You're framed correctly. Your office composition, or not office, but it's probably a fake office, is a studio. You've got this beautiful painting of yours behind you. I don't know if you're even in that studio where you record.
No, I've got a green screen behind me here.
I can tell it's the green screen, but you're not there right now, right?
No, yeah.
So I wish we could just turn it off and show. I'll just say to listeners, go see it. We'll give you a minute to do an ad later, so we'll get to them going to your site. But the studio looks so beautiful and yet elegantly simple, and I just look at that and I know that was not a simple thing to pull off. And there's all these things that you didn't know were going to be hard, and they probably crushed you for a week or month, right?
Yeah, but here, actually, so here's something I want to talk about though. About, I don't know if you've heard the difference between product, process, and practice when it comes to creative work.
Sure, go ahead.
It's probably one of the most important things that I teach my students, but it applies to anything, particularly creative things. So there's 3 modes. Whenever we're creating something, we're either in practice mode, we're in product mode, or we're in process mode. And I talk about it in art, but let's just talk about it in terms of social media, because since we just talked about the filming and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, how do you get to the point where you're creating really good content that resonates, that gets that first 3 seconds, and then gets the algorithm to push it, right? And so the very first time you go to film something, whether it's a reel, whether it's a YouTube video, whatever, it can be very, very scary. And so the first thing you do, though, is you actually learn how to do it, right? And for most of us, I think, it's like, well, whether you're using CapCut or you're using Premiere or whatever, it's like, well, let me find someone on YouTube who's got a course on how to use CapCut, right? And so you'll go in and you'll use it, and then often too they'll have like stock video that you can use, because you're not trying to create anything with a finished product. You're just going through the steps and learning, how do I cut a clip? How do I do a transition? How do I put an overlay over top? So that's practice mode, right? You're just learning, and there's no thought of actually creating a piece of content. And then there's process mode. So process mode is when we are stepping into the unknown, when we're stepping out of our comfort zone, we're trying to do something we've never done before. And that's where growth happens. But the important thing about process mode is that's also where failure happens a lot. because we don't know what we're doing, when we try it, it probably won't turn out the best. But what people need to understand is when you go into process mode, you have to understand that failure is likely, failure is okay, failure is supposed to happen, and that's where learning comes in. Because then that would be the very first time you actually go, okay, I'm going to try and create a piece of content that I'm going to put out there, right? So you're in process mode. You've never done it before. You do it. Now the light sucks, the sound is off, the editing is bad, and you put it out there and it gets 30 views, and the comments might be, you need a better mic or whatever, right? Well, then what happens is people get all upset because, oh my God, this failed, and then the next time they go to think about doing something like this, now they're afraid of failing again, and so it just becomes paralyzing. But what's important is as you learn through more practice and as you learn from being in process mode, then when we get to product mode, that's where you're at the point where you're consistently creating pretty good quality stuff, right? And but you're only using the skills, the knowledge, the concepts, the techniques that you're competent and confident in, then you should hit that bar every time, whatever that is. But the problem is you'll never grow. You'll never get better. So we need to continually be stepping back into process mode and taking risk. Try something new. Hey, I've never done something with a green screen. Let me try that, right? And it may not turn out, but that's okay because now you learned. And often in any sort of creative thing, what's important is not just what to do, but what not to do, right? What you did last time that kind of really took it in the ditch. Well, even if you paint, I say to my students, you paint the worst painting you've ever done in your life, you've learned a lot about what not to do next time. But the reason that process mode is so important is again, stepping outside of your comfort zone. But what people have to understand is, as soon as you are in process mode, you're trying to do something you've never done before. The first thing you do is give the outcome a permission to fail, right? So the actual video that you do doesn't have to turn out great. It can be horrible, but you've learned, and now your product level goes up. But the important thing about in process mode too, sometimes that's where breakthroughs happen, right? That's where, like in my world, you create the best painting you've ever created. Or even in that video thing, if you're trying to do a 30-second ad or whatever, right? It's like the ad didn't turn out, but there's that 6 seconds in there that was just magic. And you go, okay, well, how did that, now let me focus on making that whole ad, whatever I did in that 6 seconds that really made it good. And if you keep doing that, and kind of rotating between practice mode to build more specific skills, process mode to kind of push your creativity, then what happens is the product level just keeps going up and up and up and up. And so, but I find what people don't understand that when you're trying something new, you're supposed to have failures. Once they have 2 or 3 failures, then the thought of trying something new, that brings in, now the lizard brain kicks in, because now we're dealing with the fear of failure, and it's like, oh my God, the last 3 times I tried something new, it was horrible, and they don't realize, well, that's what's supposed to happen, and you're doing it right. If you're not failing, sometimes you're not trying hard enough, you're not pushing yourself.
Yeah, it's really true, and especially that first one. I love that you're telling. There's a part of this audience that doesn't know what to do that's next because they don't like their job. And when you get into that practice, and then like you're saying, into the process, just finishing the first process to be able to have a postmortem is a huge success. The whole thing is a failure. You might not have even had the 30 seconds. It's just like, I got through the race without knocking every single hurdle down. I knocked 90% of them down, but I cleared one or two.
I used to say when I used to teach in person, I can't do that anymore. It just doesn't work in terms of how many people I can get into a room or whatever. But when I did, I used to say to people, who wants to become a really good artist? And of course, everybody puts up their hand. And I said, who wants to paint 100 bad paintings? And of course, nobody put up their hand. And I was like, well, what if I told you had to paint at least 100 bad paintings before you get to the good ones? Who's willing to paint 100 bad paintings? And then they all went, okay, yeah. Okay, but it's the same in anything.
Tim, that is a serious nugget. And you mentioned at the beginning of this that it applies to all occupations and jobs. And I'm going to tell you that is a serious nugget, because when we were writing one of our books that we put together as a team, one of the award-winning writers that, may he rest in peace, is gone now, but he said something similar. He said, look, I was a brand new copywriter, and I was assigned as a young entrant into the business to be one of the headline team. And so I was just focused on headlines, and I did what I was supposed to do in school. I took 3 of my favorite headlines to the boss, and he goes, look, we win CA awards, which is, big advertising back in the day, big advertising award. He said, we are a CA award-winning shop, not because we present 3 options to a client. Go back, and what you're going to do is you're going to come up with 60 headlines. And more than that, because the 60 that you bring me as your mentor in the process are going to be all your favorite. They're going to be all 60 something that you would present to the client. And that's when the first step is. And then you're going to go back and you're going to write more if you have to, but you're going to pick the one and know why and bring me 1. And he's like, 60? Yeah. And he goes, no. You're going to have to write like 200 or 300 to come up with 60. So 100 bad paintings applies to any job. Like if you want to be amazing and do great work and win awards in your company or with customers, you're going to have to try to learn and improve. Not just do the same thing, but do it and try to learn and improve. 100 bad paintings first. Yep. And that's just prerequisite, right?
I have another little nugget too that
let's hear it.
That your audience might appreciate more, and it came into how we settled on the title of the book, because that's the kind. It's like how what are we gonna? We had the book written, right? And it's like, okay, well, what are we gonna call it, right? And I thought my personal favorite was "Starving Was Never an Option." That's what I thought was gonna kill it. But we came up with with my son and I, we came up with about 30 different titles. But then it's like, which one's best, right? So it's like, well, we got into sprint testing. And I don't know if your audience knows what sprint testing is. And that's basically what you do is you create just like a color block, like a yellow and a blue, and you just have the text over there. Starving was never an option. You can sell your art, how to sell your art, whatever. And so we created like 30 of these different graphics. And then we put them all out as Facebook ads to just run to, I think it was like 200 or 300 impressions. And it just had a learn more button, which then sent to 5 sample chapters of the book. And so we had our own idea about which one would resonate most with the audience. And actually, You Can Sell Your Art was not one of them. That one overperformed at such a high level that it wasn't even close. It was about 3 times the number of clicks we got from that, just the graphic with You Can Sell Your Art. And I was like, okay. And so now the beauty of it is, like even back in the day when you were doing it, before the idea of sprint testing and all that, you were still basing it on someone's opinion about what was going to be best, right? But now you actually have the ability here. And when you're doing the sprint test, like you're only spending like $4 in ad spend or $10 in ad spend or whatever, but you're very quickly getting real world experience about, is this title resonating with people? And so we did that. And then the same thing came for the subheading, which was a step-by-step guide to create a livable income from your art, right? And so it's like, again, that's a pretty high-level thing to be doing now on like Facebook stuff. And we actually took a workshop on how to do all that stuff. But yeah, you don't just pick one and go, that's the one.
Yeah. Do you have a video on your channel about sprint testing?
No, because mine's about art.
Yeah, well, selling it. That's a terrific story. What are your favorite platforms to do it on? Like, what's your favorite process now that years have passed?
It's 2 different things. The one thing we've really learned, and this is why it's important to kind of pay attention to the platforms for like developing people who are likely to buy my art or buy prints of my art, that's Facebook and Instagram. And the one thing I would say for people, if they're looking at getting into social media, the thing that we've really figured out finally is if you can have kind of like solid, repeatable kind of things that you do where you're not trying to script a brand new 30-second movie every time you're doing a post, right? So for me, on Facebook and Instagram, what we get a lot of is, I just have the canvas facing towards me and I just do a reveal, right? It's like a 10-second reel, and then we have another one. Now, whenever I'm painting, I have the camera, my phone just on me, so that now the sawdust we get every time I create a painting, now we've got this content of me painting. And so then I'll also do the reveal, but like halfway through, it then goes to a bunch of jump cuts of me actually completing the painting, and then turning it around. And those do really well. But the great thing about it is, okay, every time I go to paint, I know what we're doing. I don't have to, kind of come up with something new. But for the Art Academy, what I found, we spent a lot of time really mastering Facebook ads and Instagram ads, and I have some friends who are like crazy numbers with different courses. But what I found, because what I'm teaching is very long tail, it's like I'm not going to give you something that in a weekend is going to dramatically improve your art or your career or whatever. That for me to try and sell that in a minute in a 50-second ad, I come across like a snake oil salesman, It's just like selling you and so we just realized that doesn't work. Whereas on YouTube, when I can do a 10 or 15 minute video,
25 sometimes, right?
We just said, I did a live on, to promote the book. We did a bunch of live Q&As. So I went, Friday was 3.5 hours, Saturday was 5 hours, and Sunday was 3.5 hours. But in that amount of time, I have the time for people to go, oh, I think this guy is the real deal and he can help me. So we realized we don't even really try pushing the Art Academy for serious artists in the short form. But what does work well, I also have some courses where it's just like, a 5 painting course on painting sunrises and sunsets. And I'll just take you through these little painting tutorials. And in that course, I can actually give people a lot of value where they can improve over the course of, a week or a weekend or whatever. So the short form ads work for that. But if what you're selling is something that's kind of more longer, more involved, then short form ads really don't work. That's where YouTube works better, where you actually get to gain people's trust and actually give them a lot of valuable content right off the top. So they go, okay, well, yeah, I guess I want to get what's behind the paywall now.
That's terrific. That's terrific advice. Okay, I want to go back to you for just a second. We're going to get to the premium action plan where you talk about a magic domino, which is the most powerful domino, and we're gonna give people this week the ideas behind getting your magic domino. But before we do that, I've got to ask you about this police work, and tell me the most exciting short story about police work, and then the transition between being a cop and taking this on. You told us a little bit about the success on this side. Tell us about the departure on that side and such.
Yeah, it's funny, I don't think about that very often, and most coppers have a lot of stories.
Yeah. Well, give us a great one.
But I'm going to tell you one that's two that might surprise you.
Okay.
So one of my favorites is I got to meet Nelson Mandela. So he was doing his world tour, and I was part of the public order unit. I was a sergeant in the public order unit, and we were providing security. And so at this venue where he came to speak, what's really funny is the Ontario Premier, Bob Rae at the time, who was very left of center, was not a big fan of the police or whatever. So he was there too to introduce Nelson Mandela. So in comes the provincial premier, and we're backstage kind of providing the security, and Mandela and our premier walks in. The premier just walks by every one of us, doesn't even make eye contact. Nelson Mandela went up to every single police officer, shook our hands, and thanked us for being there. And I just thought, wow, that kind of says a lot.
It's a lesson, isn't it?
And then Two of my favorite stories have to do with, again, being in the public order unit. One was when they had the World Basketball Championships here, which was back in 1994. That's when all the golden team from the U.S., they were all there.
Jordan, etc.
Yeah, and so we were doing security there, but we were taking breaks. So it was my squad's turn to come out for a break, and so we go walking. We're standing outside in the parking lot. And we hear, "Hey, you guys, can you do me a favor?" And we look up, and it's Whoopi Goldberg. And she says, "I'm waiting here for my brother to come. He's got my limo, but it's like, I don't want... do you think you guys could come and just kind of stand around me so people don't see me and kind of bother me?" We said, "Okay, yeah." So anyways, we did. And this is back probably in the early 90s, mid 90s. So basically we did. We're out in the parking lot, and there was like 10 of us, I guess. So we just kind of stood around Whoopi, and she was in the middle of us. And then she just did like a 15-minute bit about her, and it wasn't even part of her routine. It was about her brother and the limo and kind of all this kind of stuff. And then in that same night too, I just remember we were going up in the elevator, and we were with the American team. And I'm 6'3".
What's a Canadian doing with the American team?
Well, because it was in Toronto.
Oh,
it was at the
I
Dome
know,
Stadium.
Because you're a cop. That's why.
We were security for everybody, right? So
I didn't think about that. You weren't just
squad,
protecting your own Canadians. You were protecting everyone.
We were protecting we were security for everyone. So, but I'm standing there on the elevator, staring at Shaq's bicep, right? Like I'm 6'3", but he's like way up here, and he just kind of looks down at me, and I said, "Yeah, I'm here to protect you." And he just kind of laughed.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, the person who has to protect Shaq from people that might beat him up or threaten him. That's interesting. So how was it leaving? Was it tough?
It was scary. It was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. I was involved in a lot of scary situations on the police force, but I still remember that last kind of 3 months leading up to when I was leaving. I would wake up in a cold sweat some nights just thinking, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" Right? Like to walk away from and I was on that career path too. I was a detective, but would have been going for detective sergeant next. And probably like a bunch of my buddies who were peers of mine, they ending up kind of like deputy chief or staff superintendent. So I was on that kind of career glide path to move up in the rank system, and just kind of walking away to try and make a living as an artist. It was scary. And it was funny with my wife. One of her friends said once, it was about 3 months after I'd left the police force, and her friend said to her, "You must sleep so much better now that Tim's not on the police force." And she said, "My husband quit his job to paint. What makes you think I sleep at all?"
I saw that coming. That is a perfect story. Yeah. That is the story of you leaving the police force right there in a second. That is hilarious. Well, it's been a great free episode. We're going to do the premium action plan in a second, but I've got to point out a couple of nuggets that I got. The regrets of omission that you started with, and then talking about practice and process and product. And go see his 80-20 video. It's all business. It's not about art. And then this set of lessons that you've just given us about life and really grabbing a hold of it. I love these. What I want to do now is we're going to switch to the premium action plan. We're going to talk about the magic domino, the powerful domino. And so for those of you that join us there, I just want to tell you really briefly, this is we've offered a free month so that you can see some of these that you want to see behind the paywall. And like Tim said, we invest an extraordinary amount of time on this, and so we are putting up a premium version. We'd love you to join us in the Bold Encounters Club and help us continue to do this and grow it and get great at it like he's described. So let's go there now, Tim. This is a moment not to rush past these ideas. If anything created clarity or pointed to a change in your daily life, the premium action plan we're about to do will help you turn it into one small step this week. If you're not a member of the Bold Encounters Club yet, you can join it. And you can even try it at boldencounters.tv and click join. Or you can go by going onto your own platform and clicking the premium version of this episode. If you are a member, you're set. But remember, you can also give access to the club to anyone else and let them try it. Go to boldencounters.tv. Either way, we'll begin this week's premium action plan now. Gift Bold Encounters Premium today. Go to boldencounters.tv and start leading your life's work right now.